Viewer contributions make local programming possible on WNIN. Become a member of WNIN with your contribution so we can continue to make this programming available. Visit WNIN.org and click on the donate button.
Well, it's Thursday night, and Pat, we're back.
Shout it from the rooftops.
By the way, is that your impersonation of the governor? No tie?
I want you all to know, all 5 million loyal viewers, please know this. History is being made here right on the set of Shively Shoulders. Just back from the Southern office, I'm modeling the relaxed, left, progressive side. We've got to be relaxed, because if we're not, what's going on at the federal level, the state level, especially the state level, will make us go crazy.
I want to go crazy. I'm angry.
I hear you.
I'm upset.
What upsets you, Your Honor?
What upsets me, and we'll talk a lot about the national, lots to talk about. We'll have the next show following this one to talk about more of the national. But this General Assembly just adjourned. The so-called property tax deal, you know, the average taxpayer is going to receive maybe $300 break, and services are going to be cut. There's no county officials ever going to vote to raise local option income tax because they know that's the way out of office.
So the citizens will suffer. The whole program appears to be to give businesses tax cuts. Best I can tell, the whole goal of the thing was to cut inventory tax, personal property tax for businesses of a certain size.
And here's the sad thing. The most business-oriented governor to serve in our lifetime, Mitch Daniels. Mitch Daniels dealt with the property tax issue. He put a cap on the assessments, not only in legislation, put it in the Constitution. I don't know, Pat, how many people in your neighborhood are complaining about how high their taxes are? Nobody was complaining.
We get a 200-some-odd page revenue bill, and in the last minutes, they slip in things like cuts to public television. We'll talk about that. Cuts to higher education. Cuts, elimination of 3 elected seats on the IU Board of Trustees. We can go on and on and on. Some of this stuff was damn near criminal.
I'm not just saying this to flatter you.
Oh, go ahead.
They've eliminated the trustees elected by the alumni.
Correct.
You were elected by the alumni.
5 times.
You made one of the greatest contributions to this state and to this community. The IU Medical Center would not be here in Evansville doing what it's doing to health care, but for Patrick A. Shoulders.
Kind of you to say that was a team effort. But, to your point, I doubt seriously whether that medical center would have gone from non-existent to the top of IU's capital projects list if there hadn't been an Evansville voice on that board. That is too bad. And Mike, no brains, all brawn, you ought to send it back. You haven't signed it yet. You're not going to sign it till we're on the air on Thursday. There's so much horrible stuff stuck in that. Didn't they cut the judiciary funding? And they cut judgeships?
They cut the budget for the Supreme Court of Indiana, which that's not for those 5 people. That's for all the programs for problem-solving courts, grants for those kinds of activities, been cut.
Well, it makes no sense to me. Library funding is cut. All the things that make us a joint society, that we're in this together. We did all of this. It appears to me for this governor to be able to say, I cut your property taxes. The fact that it's $200 and businesses are reaping the biggest benefit. Now, people will say, well, they're the employers. They need a break. I don't know of any business that needs a break.
Folks, what did this country just go through with the COVID situation? After the COVID, every governor in the country, the president of the United States, committed themselves to public health. What did Indiana do in this last budget? They cut the funding of public health.
Indiana, when I was on the Board of Trustees at IU, Indiana ranked 49th. I know this because we have a big hospital that IU runs. Indiana ranked 49th out of 50 in expenditures on public health at that time, Your Honor. So It's a matter of priorities, and this is the problem we have when we have one-party rule. The Democrats are irrelevant in the Indiana state government. They cannot show up, and there is still a quorum present in both houses. This is why you get candidates like Jim fill-in-the-blanks in the United States Senate. You get candidates like Mark Make-It-Messier off to Congress. At least when Bouchon was there, the seat was empty. Now we've got a guy...
Easy now, easy.
Now we've got a guy that doesn't even need to have town halls. They've got a lock. They've absolutely got a lock on the government. And it reminds me, Your Honor, of 100 years ago, around this time, there was a fire in the heartland. You probably read that book. At that time, the government was controlled by something called the Klan for a few years. That fever broke. I hope this one will.
Well, I think it will. I think the average citizen out there is fed up with canceling town halls, is fed up with last-minute additions to the bills, because so there's no public comment, no ability for the people to be heard. You can't do that very long without some repercussions. I think they're coming.
We see that with the Orange Monster. He's in 100, we're taping this on 100 days of the president. What is he, the 45th or the
46th?
46th and the 44th, whatever he is. He's a joke. But we see this at his 100-day anniversary. His ratings have now gone lower than anybody at the 100-day level since they've been keeping them.
My friends that are watching this may say, Les Shively, remember when you were a conservative, you wanted less government, didn't want government waste. I'm all for that, but you have to do it by the law. If we don't pay respect to the rule of law, it's anarchy and we're doomed.
We're going to talk a lot about the law today. We have our good friend, President P from UE, who's going to join us in a little bit to talk about, because of his legal background, but we're going to talk about the law. And I believe you and I will agree on this, that the rule of law is kind of right there on the edge right now.
I wouldn't say we're in a crisis at this point, but we're at a point where we need a strong reminder of the rule of law.
Before we get to our guest, you and I can agree that this legislative session, the way it ended, is an embarrassment. It is a challenge to all of the things that many of us hold dear, like public television, like libraries, like funding for local governments and parks, things we enjoy as a community.
And things we need like public health.
Things we need like public health. At the federal level, we haven't been on for a long time. But when you say the rule of law, we pardoned people who attacked the United States Capitol. We have a president who gets on the air after a plane crashes into the Potomac or wherever it was and says that the air traffic controllers were mentally deficient or something appointed by the last president. These are terrible times.
And here's what's really sad. This economic plan. What do we do with the economic plan? We go after our neighbor, our good friend Canada.
Who, in response, just elected the anti-Trump candidate who had no chance.
By the way, the conservative candidate was 27 points ahead until 2 weeks ago.
Exactly. Trudeau, the Liberal Party, was in big trouble. The other guy's 27 points ahead, and then Donald speaks, going to make Canada the 51st state. All of a sudden, the anti-Trump loudest voice is now the new, what is it, Prime Minister, or what do they call it up there?
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister of Canada. Well, we have a tariff today, and then tomorrow we say, well, we're going to relax that one. We're going to put some over here. I think he just enjoys, we know he enjoys the spotlight, but roiling the markets.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not an economist, but one thing I do know from reading the Wall Street Journal and other publications with very learned reporters, authors, shall we say, one thing the economy hates is uncertainty.
Yeah.
He creates uncertainty every time he wakes up.
Empty the granaries, get the potato chips on the table, grab the kids and the poochies, because when we come back, we have Pres P to talk about the third branch of government, can't pronounce it. The United States Supreme Court.
Pietruszkiewicz. Can't you pronounce his name?
No, I cannot. Thank you for rejoining us. We are honored to have a gentleman who hosted me not only for breakfast today, but for lunch as well on the beautiful campus of University of Evansville. We have President P. Christopher Pietruszkiewicz. Perfectly pronounced?
I ran into him at the end of the year. I said, Mr. President, have you had a good year? Was 24 a good year? He said, no, I was never invited to be back as a guest on Shively Shoulders.
That could have something to do with
yeah.
him continuing to turn down my application for the Emily Dickinson Professor of Poetry seat at UE, but we'll talk about that another time. Welcome, Pres P.
Good to be here. You know, I thought I reached the pinnacle the first time I was here. I'm back.
And that's by popular demand. Our 5 million viewers, we heard from them on a lot of topics, but many, many, many of them said, when are you going to have Pres P back?
Well, it's good to be here. And, you know, we've got a lot of things to talk about
well,
today,
we do. And we have you here because you have a background in law. Tell them a little bit about why you're entitled to sit here and talk to us about the law.
Well, I did practice law for 10 years before becoming part of higher education, trial attorney for the United States Department of Justice in Washington.
There used to be one.
There still is.
Oh, well, it's a weapon now of the Fed. I'm sorry, go ahead.
10 years in Washington, D.C., traveled around the country and represented the United States in incredible honor. So big part of what I get a chance to do is to teach. And I taught this semester at the University of Evansville. I taught constitutional law this semester.
Indeed.
And
you
really,
were a law school person, weren't you? A dean or
I was a law professor for 12 years and then a law school dean for 6. And 7 years in Evansville, including 2 stops on Shively Shoulders.
Well, we are pleased to have you here, and we salute you as our constitutional law expert. So let's come out of the gate with a guy who continues, convicted of nothing, to sit in a jail in El Salvador because the ICE people snatched him away, sent him away. Courts continue to rule, and he still sits. Give me your constitutional take on all that.
Add to those facts. He was wrong. The government admits he was wrongfully
detained,
exported to El Salvador.
Yes, administrative error.
Yes, administrative error. Yet he's not back yet, even though the courts have ordered that. Even the Supreme Court has ordered that.
Well, so the Supreme Court said that they had to facilitate his return.
Facilitate his return. Now, interpret that for us, please.
What is that?
Well, Judge Zenas says, the district court judge in Maryland, that not only did they have to facilitate his return, but they had to effectuate his return. Supreme Court says they can facilitate the return, but not effectuate the return.
So that's why the president came out 2 days ago and said he won that case.
Well, the president said that he doesn't have jurisdiction because.
But he had jurisdiction to set up the shipment of these people.
So there's a detention facility in El Salvador. The United States is paying $6 million to house the prisoners there. Correct.
So, clear the fog here. What's your take? Are we at a constitutional crisis? Did the Supreme Court say bring him back and the president's refusing? Or a district court says bring him back and the president's refusing? Where are we?
Supreme Court sent it back to the district court and said you have to clarify what effectuate means, but facilitate they haven't quite defined yet, and that comes from previous Supreme Court case law. There is another case in which another judge in Maryland says not only do you have to facilitate another prisoner's return, but you actually have to ask the El Salvadorian government to be able to return him. So that was not in the first order, but in the second order.
And when they say we can't tell El Salvador what to do, well, the fact is we're paying them to maintain this facility, right?
We are paying them to maintain the facility, correct? Yes.
When we talk to you all about the fact and you hear this, constitutional crisis, we really are talking about the fact that judges, and we're seated with a good one right here, give orders, but they don't have any way to enforce them.
That's the constitutional crisis to the extent that there is one.
Yeah.
Is how does a court enforce it? I mean, that goes all the way back to Marbury versus Madison, the first case that we all read in law school, which is the court has the ability to determine what the law is, but the executive branch has the power to be able to enforce it. And that's the extent to which we find ourselves in a constitutional crisis.
Another interesting case that's out there is the facts are being developed slowly but surely. This judge in Wisconsin, misdemeanor court judge, was arrested with her robe on and handcuffed with her robe on for allegedly facilitating an illegal immigrant from being picked up by ICE. Where do you see that case going?
It's federal court right now. Not surprisingly, the administration has said that no officer is above the law and was preventing ICE from being able to detain someone that was in that person's courtroom. So that one's going to play out over a period of time. I don't expect that one to get resolved anytime soon.
Well, can we frame that within a Supreme Court ruling last term that said the president, as long as it's in an official act, is immune? Judges have always been immune for their rulings. You can't sue them if you don't like it. This judge was acting as a judge, right?
Well, the Supreme Court said three things last time, so there's three different standards that they use. If it's within the president's constitutional responsibility, he has absolute immunity. If it's within his official duties, then he has qualified immunity. And if it's not within his official duties, he doesn't have any immunity. The question, I think, in this case is going to turn out on the Wisconsin judge whether she was acting in the scope of her authority.
And so if she says, I was, she ought to have at least the immunity that Big Don has.
That's going to be the argument that the court's going to make in Wisconsin.
I would hope. Now, we got a big one coming down the pike for the Supreme Court. Our clown president believes that birthright citizenship, and the Supreme Court took the case, that birthright citizenship is an issue here, that a person born in the United States isn't automatically a citizen. I want to make sure that I have the facts here correct. What do you understand about that one?
So that was based on this 14th Amendment that was passed in 1868,
Right.
that was in response to the Dred Scott decision about whether enslaved people were citizens in the United States or not. Following Supreme Court case in about 1800 that said that a resident was a citizen of the United States because that person fell within the jurisdiction of the United States. I think the argument in this case is with respect to migrants and immigrants and those that are not legally here in the United States, whether they can distinguish the case from 1798 because they are not lawful residents of the United States. There's a phrase in the 14th Amendment that says subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And the argument is whether that jurisdiction happens because they are legally in the United States or not.
But the 14th Amendment says no person born or naturalized. And so if an immigrant comes across the border and gives birth to a baby on our soil, I thought that's what they were contesting, whether those children are U.S. citizens.
Yeah, that I think has been the position of the administration for the last 125 years. It doesn't appear that that's the position right now.
Of the Trumpsters.
So there was a Supreme Court decision in 1992 about a Texas statute about undocumented people and whether their children were required to go to college or not. Supreme Court 5-4, Justice Brennan says that they are covered by the Equal Protection Clause. So that is a more recent interpretation of the 14th Amendment.
Let me ask you this. Federal district courts are really coming under fire, such that Congress is in a process of passing a law called the Rogue Judges Law. It stems from these temporary injunctions that have been granted by these district courts that have been made to have nationwide application. What they're basically saying is that a federal judge in Indiana can't issue a ruling that has effect over the entire United States. What's your position regarding those kinds of actions?
Well, there's 28 right now, 28 nationwide injunctions. And that means a judge in Seattle or a judge in Boston or a judge in Maryland issues an injunction that is with respect to the entire United States. That is one of the things that is on emergency appeal to the United States Supreme Court about whether judges can have the ability to utilize a national injunction or they have to use the class certification process under the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure.
Let me ask you this. Honestly, I'm a little bothered by the nationwide implication of these rulings, but if I go to court and I'm challenging the application of a executive order that has nationwide application, and I ask for injunctive relief, how am I going to get full relief if that district court doesn't enforce it nationally?
Well, that's a really good example based on the first case that we just talked about, which is that originally the judge in Washington, D.C., in Maryland, issued an injunction, and Supreme Court said it had to be based in habeas corpus, which is where the person is. everybody who is being sent to El Salvador comes from a Texas prison. So all the cases moved to Texas. It seemed like the ACLU and other organizations that were acting on behalf of the immigrants were trying to figure out where they were, which is why I think probably the nationwide injunction makes a lot of sense, at least in those cases.
Before we leave Mr. Garcia, of course, we don't have to worry about him. He's not going anywhere. He's in jail in El Salvador. But what's your prediction there? The district court person is going to say, bring him back. What happens?
I think that becomes the question about whether the administration is going to follow the rule of law as determined by the court. As determined by the court. And I don't think it's going to be at the district court level. I think when you get to the Supreme Court level, if they fashion a ruling that is opposed by the administration, whether they will follow through on following the rule of law.
And we have in our history, right? Andrew Jackson said they've made their decision, now let's see them enforce it. So, I mean, and Trump used to have his picture there. I don't know if he does in the Oval anymore or not. But so we could have that crisis coming. But there have been other interesting cases. Last week, it seems to me a case was argued out of Maryland where parents don't want their children having books with LGBTQ storylines, right?
Correct.
Talk about that one.
So that case was just argued last week.
Yeah.
It seems pretty clear that the conservative majority, the 6-3 majority that exists on the United States Supreme Court, is very likely going to not require parents to have their children participate in that type of curriculum. I think the biggest problem that the Supreme Court had in that argument was that there's no opt-out provision. So Montgomery County in Maryland passes their curriculum that says LGBTQ books are part of the curriculum. Originally,
which has always been a traditional role of a local school board, is to prescribe. I mean, in this government, this country of ours, the tradition is curriculum is kind of a local thing, right?
Correct, and that's been the case here.
Yeah.
A number of parents wanted to opt out. Originally, Montgomery County said yes. Then it became unwieldy. They said no. And then 2 people bring suit. It ultimately gets to the United States Supreme Court, and I suspect the Supreme Court will follow suit.
And the Supreme Court sticks its nose into a local school board matter by saying this is a freedom of religion, speech.
It's freedom of religion case for them.
Not sticking their nose. The case was brought to the court, high court.
Then they don't have to take it. So they stuck their judicial robes in
so
on a case.
So if they rule in a position you would favor, it would be the proper thing for them to do, correct?
No. Their ideological bias is shown in which cases they decide to take. They took this one to say that you don't have to have your baby in there when they talk about homosexuals. Now, when you and I were growing up, people believed that the races were not to be mixed. And it wasn't until 1967, Loving, right, in Georgia. Mm-hmm. There's got to be some strain of religion somewhere that says the races shouldn't be mixed. So if that Maryland school board decides to have a book in the primary grades where there's black people and white people together, does my freedom of religion say, okay, we took care of homosexuals, now let's take care of this racial mixing?
Seems like the Supreme Court is taking more and more of those cases that have religious animus associated with them. And they've been pretty consistent that every time you have a religion case, most of the conservative majority follows along.
And I'm saying they're just using religion and speech now to get where they want to get to. But they don't care about my opinion.
One of the reactions by some of the members of majority in Congress towards some of these decisions by federal district courts is to impeach the judge that issued the order. Explain to our viewers what it takes to impeach a federal judge.
Well, Your Honor, there's been a handful in the history of our country.
L.C. Hastings was one, and he ran for Congress and won.
Well, that was one, I think, of 3. And usually it's based on conviction of a felony in many cases, not because they disagree with an order. I practiced law for 10 years. I appeared before lots of judges, and some of the rulings I didn't agree with, but that was never part of the consideration, is you have the ability to appeal, and that's what an appellate court is for. If you don't like the district court decision, take it to the Fifth Circuit. If you don't like the Fifth Circuit decision, take it to the United States Supreme Court. But you got to believe that the judges are doing their jobs.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. Other significant case, I mean, I know there's a religious charter school case up there. There's whether state can say sign on for online pornography. There's transgender rights case up there. Anything else we ought to be watching for that you think is heavy?
I think the gun cases will continue to be something that the Supreme Court focuses on, whether you can have ghost guns, whether you
Didn't my team win one on that finally?
You 8-1.
On the ghost?
Yes, on the
they
ghost
said we
cases.
can regulate that one?
Correct.
Whew.
But lost 6-3 on the other one.
And the other one was?
About bump stocks.
Bump stocks. Well, ghosts evidently are okay, but no bump stocks. And prediction on the religious charter schools. You know, we're very fortunate in this town. We have a wonderful signature school, is award-winning national, but charter schools throughout the rest of the state have largely failed. Now we've got a religious school that says we're a charter school and we want some of that money. When we're growing up and prayer was taken out of the school, that would have been an easy one. What's your prediction on that?
Likely a conservative majority wins on that one.
The wall between church and state is now a molehill.
Let me ask as a final question. We've gone through a lot of pending cases, a lot of issues out there. Are we in a constitutional crisis as we speak?
I don't think we're there yet. The Supreme Court so far, I think, has been very judicious in the language that they're using to make sure that we don't get to a constitutional crisis. You know, Pat and I just talked about the word, what does effectuate mean?
Right.
What does facilitate mean? Right? That is language that we can interpret. It's not necessarily the Supreme Court putting their fingers down and saying, this is what I need the administration to do. I think they've been very clear about trying to make sure that they can avert a constitutional crisis if possible.
Final point, I would never bet him on the golf course. He hits, I'm just saying. Last time he was on, we were congratulating him on a hole-in-one. But I know a bet that we can make.
What's that?
IU and UE were supposed to play baseball today, weren't they?
They were.
But
They will play tomorrow.
And they will play tomorrow. Now, there's a bet.
UE wins, I can, you got to wear this pin. How's that?
All right, deal. Thank you for coming, Pres P. Always a pleasure.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, when we come back, I'll take a last shot at Patrick. Hang in there.
It's a kinder, gentler Shively Shoulders. The world is so screwed up that we've agreed on dang near everything today, Your Honor.
You know, this goes back to when I was on the Board of Law Examiners. I had a professor who was on that board who was from Berkeley, as liberal as he could be.
God bless him.
But and most of our decisions we made were unanimous. Occasionally it was an 8-2 decision. And when the two were Joellen and myself, a conservative and a liberal, because we both believed in one thing, the rule of law. And that, our political backgrounds didn't change that.
Pres P was wonderful. I mean, he's just the facts, but he obviously with his background and training in the law and practicing law and was a United States government lawyer, he understands the rule of law.
And one thing I'll just add this sounds somewhat repetitious, but all my friends out there, conservative business people, think that I've gone to the other side. Let me tell you, Alan Greenspan made this very clear when he was chairman of the Federal Reserve. Without the rule of law, you have chaos and the economy disintegrates.
There's a role in our government for a two-party system, for respectful dialogue like we've always had. We're fast losing that right now. We have a rubber stamp Congress for a clown in the White House and an echo chamber that Fox, who in this Garcia case can't talk about the rule of law and what enforcement when a court rules. What they want to talk about is, well, he's a member of this gang, or he's been in judges before, and he was a juvenile delinquent. No, that's fog. That's fog. If a judge rules, it's the executive branch to enforce it.
Well, when we see you again, you'll be wearing a tie, correct?
Well, we'll hear from our 5 million viewers, and if I get enough fan mail, perhaps not.
All right. Thanks for being with us.